Uh, so my name's Karen, and I know that people who are here to see and hear Lama Rod will be disappointed, and I too have been looking forward to seeing Lama Rod tonight. And this was a last minute schedule change. He had a conflict that he had to honor. He's fine. Don't worry about him. But uh, but he asked me to do this talk to hold this space tonight. So I'm really honored to be here. And I want to invite everyone to do something that we do on Monday night with Lama Rod at Medicine Buddha and Sunday morning at morning service with Lama Rod, which is I want to invite you to put prayer requests in the chat. And a lot of Buddhists, like, they don't use the word prayer, but prayer is simply intention. And those of us from an insight Buddhist meditation tradition are familiar with the loving kindness meditation, which to me is really a prayer. Um, may I be safe. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May my friend be safe. You know, that's a prayer. And prayer is simply intention. So I found it really beautiful that Lama Rod invites us to put our prayers in the chat. And I want to invite you to do that. Now, to think about what is it that you want to ask, to intend. Prayer is an energy, a real energy transfer. So, for example, I'd like to pray for my friend Connie, who is having chemotherapy, and her husband. And I'd like to pray for Lama Rod as he transitions to Atlanta, that be easeful for him. And also a prayer of gratitude for him. This is good. This is. Oh, okay. Thank you. Screen is frozen, reloading your browser. Yes, yes, I've seen this before. I've had that experience as well. Thank you for staying with it and trying to fix it. Thank you to everyone. Um, yeah, Randa is not seeing anything, and I have had that experience too, and I forget how I fixed it, honestly. Um, but maybe Sarah knows. Thank you, Sarah, for doing tech. And if you're not seeing anything or your screen is frozen, oh, thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Eddie. Yeah. Okay, I think you fixed it. Thank you so much. Refresh, refresh, and press play, Randa. Try that. I'm not so familiar with oh, I think that was me. Thank you. I really appreciate that you're putting these things in the chat so that we can figure them out. Um, and the background noise was me, and I will not do that again. And I thank you for saying that. It's a nervous habit, actually. So okay, now Randa can see. Uh, so it is my deepest wish to honor my teacher, Lama Rod, and honor all of us um, who might be disappointed that he's not here. I think he'll be here next week, and we get to see him a lot. He's around a lot, and I just want to thank him for his beautiful teachings. And I'm going to talk a lot about the things that he's taught me. So once again, I want to invite everyone, if there is any prayer that you want to share, Um, and Eddie writes, my family who are at risk with COVID, that's a prayer that I think a lot of us have for family, for friends. And we can come back to that as things come to you. I wanted to tell you a little bit about what it means to have a spiritual teacher. And Lama Rod's been my teacher for about 5 years, I think, at least 5 years. And where I really connect with him is 4 different lineages. He happens to have all of the lineages that I have in different ways, but Reiki, the church, Buddhism, although my study was not in Tibetan Buddhism, and Tantra, Vedic Tantra. And what I learned finally was what I learned finally about Vedic Tantra after studying it for many years is that it's very similar to Buddhist Tantra in the deepest way. So that's why I'm comfortable in Bhumisparsha, even though Tibetan Buddhism is not my training. But it's why I really appreciate the things that Lama Rod teaches and how he teaches. So it got me thinking about what it means to have a spiritual teacher, because I knew people might really have wished to see him tonight, and I wanted to kind of represent what I learned from him. And I had to go back to the first time I had a spiritual teacher. And I'm glad you're fixing. Thank you very much for fixing the tech things. So it's the longing of our hearts that brings us to a spiritual teacher. And the very first time that I had a teacher, a meditation teacher, I had been praying, begging prayer for years to find a teacher. And I did not want a guru. I did not want to have to go to India to meet her. I did not want any of those things. And of course, the teacher who came was a guru. And I had done a retreat with her, having tried to meditate on my own for many years and knowing that I needed more. I needed a teacher. But all the teachers that I tried didn't know really more than I did. So finally, I went to this weekend thing that was on satellite TV. It was before the time of internet, and it was for a weekend of meditation. And I remember crying the whole weekend. I remember feeling like I had become a dry sponge. And that in the atmosphere of that devotion and that beauty, the chants, the meditation, and this teacher, I was being moistened. And I was weeping the whole time. And a few days later, I realized that something was completely missing. And it was a feeling of dread, which I had had most of the time, but a little off and on. So it took me a few days to realize that the dread was completely gone. And this is one of the ways that teachers can function in our lives, sometimes after years or a period of time, in my case, that time, just a weekend. Something shifts because we're with this person. And that's what transmission is. For some people, they've experienced that kind of thing very instantly. That's not been my experience. And I think mostly for me, it's been about just showing up, being with the teacher. And during this period of time, most recently, when there has been so much grief and anxiety and worry and, for me, busyness, it has helped me so much to keep returning to seeing Lama Rod, hearing him Sunday morning, Monday evening. And your teacher may be Lama Justin, your teacher may be someone entirely different. But I think all of us experience that something happens just with the consistency of the practice of the presence, being in the presence of the teacher. And what happens is they end up saying things like my first teacher once made a very offhanded comment about how being overwhelmed is a habit. And I remember that made no sense to me at all. But being overwhelmed was one of my most difficult issues. I get overwhelmed a lot, and I would have nightmares about being overwhelmed since I was a child. But when she said that, and I began to think about it, I realized, oh, I'm feeling overwhelmed. Maybe this is just a habit. And like Lama Rod talks about spaciousness, that brought some spaciousness to the feeling of being overwhelmed. It broke through that hard, I'm overwhelmed, and I could open. Oh, maybe this is just a habit. Yeah, I'm in the habit of being overwhelmed. And so, the nightmares went away, but also now when I get overwhelmed, usually in a short period of time, I may be crazy for a few minutes, but in a short period of time, I can say, okay, I'm overwhelmed. That's what this is. And I can open to this feeling, give it space, and now I'll just do one thing at a time. That's the power of a spiritual teacher. It seems simple, but it can really transform, really has transformed my life, these little things one at a time. I remember early on when I first met Lama Rod in a few of his talks, he talked about his pettiness. And I thought, oh no, Lama Rod, no, he's not petty. I'm sure he's not petty. I'm not even petty. And then I started noticing my pettiness, I never thought about it. And to this day, it's like, oh yeah, this is really petty. And it kind of makes me laugh. But a relationship with a spiritual teacher is not like a normal relationship. And that takes some getting used to. When I first met my first spiritual teacher, I went to India to meet her. And, there is this thing where, even though there were thousands of people there in this ashram, I expected somehow for her to recognize me because my heart was like, wow, this is my teacher. I can feel that. She never knew my name or recognized me in the 20 years that I studied with her. It's not like a normal relationship, but it can really transform us. And 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 what it feels like to me is that we are in a dark house. We're in a world that isn't our home. We're born with this inner sense of justice, this inner sense. We are love. Babies, you see them, they're just love. They're just pure beauty and openness and joy and playfulness. But we're born into families that crush us and cultures that crush us. So that very often, by the time we're adults, and even sometimes when we're children, we feel lost. We feel alone. And my image for that really is that we're in a cold, dark house, a culture that thinks it's fine to have homelessness and nuclear bombs and corrupt politicians. It's crazy. It's not who we are. It's not who we really are. And so our first thing is to think there's something wrong with me. But no, this is the experience. This is what the Buddha was talking about suffering. This is the experience of being human. Because we're in this world that is not made for us in a way. So teachers, spiritual practice, and teachers, true practice, are like lights that lead us toward the door or the window out of the dark house, back to who we truly are. Like the breadcrumbs in the forest that lead us home. These lights that we find because of the longing of our hearts, these teachers, these practices. This is why Jesus said, I am the light, I am the door, not just Jesus, our teachers are that. And then in tantric practice, we realize eventually we are the light. too. And this is also what Jesus said, you are the light of the world. The teacher, the guru, is not different from our inner self. But we don't know that for a long time. And even after we know that, we have to keep being reminded of it. Practice, this kind of practice that I'm talking about, where we just keep learning and growing and looking to the practices and looking to the teacher. These practices are like an alchemy that turns dross metal into gold. It changes us. It changes us so that we don't have those same habits, so that we get really brave, so that when we see something wrong, we can speak up. And as we grow deeper into light, into who we truly are, life doesn't get easier. And sometimes it may get quite a bit harder. Reverend William Barber, who founded the Poor People's Campaign, said, if your spiritual experience does not produce a quarrel with the world, then your claim to be spiritual is suspect. So once again, as we become more grounded in who we truly are and in the truth, our quarrel with the world increases. But it's not because there's something wrong with us. You know, it's this song that I keep thinking about today. This world is not my home. I am a stranger here. That becomes more and more true. And the words that I learned for this song, this world is not my home, I am a stranger here. Amazing world, a land of mystery, of consciousness and care and wild tranquility. My life is now transformed, more earthly than before, because I don't feel at home in the world anymore. It's a paradox, you know. We become more here as we cultivate our awareness, as we cultivate our mindfulness, as we allow ourselves to be present in our bodies, to sense our breath, be really present with the people that we're present with, to really look in one another's eyes, to really take in who they are. We find our world is more earthly than before, and yet we don't feel at home in the world anymore. This world is such a mystery and a wonder, and it becomes more and more of a mystery and a wonder when we allow our own inner self to unfold without judgment. Our tender care for our grief, for our woundedness, opens us to the suffering of the world. James Baldwin said, "You think that your pain and grief are something that has never happened in world history. But then you read, it was Dostoevsky and Dickens who taught me the things that torment me are the most precisely those that connect me to all people, the living and those who have ever lived. Only when we face these open wounds in ourselves can we understand them in other people." And it is our teachers who keep meeting us with kindness and saying, it's okay, you're okay. You're okay, exactly as you are. It's only as we welcome our own woundedness and limitations that we can see who we truly are. So I want to, hi, Karen.
I don't know how that happened. Get me out of here.
This is Karen. This is Karen, the other Karen. She's
No,
wonderful. She's
that
a
is
tech
weird.
person.
I just launched on here to listen. Okay, I got to get out of here. Can somebody get me out?
I think last time I talked about how I have managed to be a tech host sometimes, and I always do something weird. And I want to say while I'm talking that about tech hosts, that tech hosts are great and wonderful. And if you'd like to join us, you are so welcome to do that. Thank you, Sarah. Um, thank you so much. I really liked that. So, my first spiritual teacher taught me about devotion. I was really down on devotion. I was raised Protestant, which is, for me, it was kind of no white Protestant, white Western Protestantism, there, where they turn down the lights during the sermon so everyone can fall asleep. There's and we say thank you, Tony, um, and we say the Apostles' Creed. You know, I believe in God the Father Almighty, Maker of heaven. I mean, it's a nightmare. And to me, every time we would say the Apostles' Creed, it was like we were just killing God. Like my experience of church, I'm sorry if I'm offending anyone, but it was bad. It was, my spirituality was all outside of that. But nature, nature saved me. But anyway, I didn't understand devotion. I didn't understand Catholics who crossed themselves. I didn't understand people who bowed. I didn't understand lighting candles, nothing. And then when I went to India and I lived in this ashram, and everything in the ashram was about devotion. Um, you would sweep the path perfectly because the guru might walk on the path and you wanted it to be perfect. And as amazingly silly as that sounds, it caused us to do everything so carefully and with such reverence. And then we would wave trays of light to the deities and we would bow. Um, and the first time I really did that, I really bowed, something happened to my heart. And I got it. I got it. Why people do that. Why people purposely put their bodies below their heads, their hearts above their heads. There's something about it when you do it with a very sincere heart that really moves that alchemical process along, that unfolding from within of who we truly are. And I remember one time, it was actually years after that, there was a fire ceremony and there were a lot of people there and it was cold and it was rainy and wet. And I was wet and cold. And I remember the Brahmins were doing all of this very specific stuff. You put this in the fire and that in the fire and this chant and that chant. And all the chants are in a language I don't understand. And it's going on and on and on. And I remember then becoming cynical again and thinking, oh, what does this mean? I wish they would just stop so I could go eat lunch, you know? So that's really my thought. And just as I was really planning my escape, the Brahmins did this thing. They put the little sprinklers in the water, that the holy water by the fire, in order to share the blessings with all of us of this sacred fire. And so they start sprinkling the water on the crowd. And of course, my response is, oh, I'm wet enough, I'm cold enough, I'm going to get colder and wetter. When the water hit me, it went right through me. It went right through my body. The feeling, like if you ever have been baptized in the Holy Spirit, the feeling of Shakti is another word for it in the Vedic Tantric tradition. And I just got it, and I shifted immediately into wow, wow. devotion is magic. The devotion of these Brahmin priests who somehow in their love and their belief and faith managed to transmit that to us, even those of us who were determined not to meet it with love or openness. When we are willing to step outside of this world that is really not our home, magic happens. And I can think of a million ways where that can be true. One of them is, I think, a story that I've told here before, but I always keep coming back to it, that when I was the pastor of this queer church, and I remember one time this young man came. This happened all the time, but he came because he had AIDS and he knew he was dying, and his mother had sent him a tract that said, AIDS is God's punishment and you're going to hell. And so I knew that you can't talk people out of this kind of thing. You can't argue the Bible with them and have it really change what they're feeling inside themselves. So what I learned how to do was to say, look, just make this little leap with me. I want you to just imagine. Well, first we would sort of get into a meditative state, a little quiet place. And then I would say, just imagine that Jesus is in the room with you, that he's here with us. Just do it. And every time I did it, I was sure nothing was going to happen. And every time I did it, if I waited a little while and said, did he come? They would say, yeah, he came. And usually by then, someone would be crying. And this young man that I'm thinking of right now, although it was a little different each time, this is how it kind of always went. And I said, did you ask him? Ask him your question? And his question was, why don't you change me? Why don't you fix me? And he said, Jesus said, because you're fine. You're not broken. And I love you. And he felt in his heart this tremendous shift. And every time I ever did this, and I also worked with the teacher who did it with me, it was amazing because it didn't come from our minds. It came from something much deeper. Because part of us was willing to be open to that. So, meditation has been said to be listening, and prayer is talking. and I think that in our traditions here, we're opening to both the listening and the talking. The open door between our world and the world of our ancestors. Between this world that's not our home, that can feel like a dark, cold house, and a place of light where I think the ancestors are really helping us out right now. I want to read this story from this book called Funeral Diva by Pamela Sneed. Oh, Tony had a very similar experience on Halloween during Lama Rod's ancestor practice. That's really cool. It's really cool. Thank you so much, Tony. A lot of white gay men wrote about their experiences in the 80s. Afterwards, it took people a long time to start writing, but they did. And then some white lesbians wrote some things. And this is the first thing I've seen by a Black lesbian whose name is Pamela Sneed. She's a visual artist, that's her art, and a poet. And this was written in poetry, and she writes about a funeral. And many of us have been to a lot of these funerals. Were in the 80s and 90s, funerals of our friends, of our whole community. Sometimes it seemed like. And this was a funeral of a friend of Pamela, a very dear friend named Donald Woods, who was a Black poet, a gay male poet. And he had died of AIDS. So I'm going to read this because it's been haunting me ever since I read it, and in a good way. At the funeral, inside of the church, loyalties again were divided between some of Donald's activist, lesbian, and gay family and his biological family. Like him, Donald's immediate family was devoutly Christian, at odds with the fact that he was gay, and purposely failed to mention in the program or eulogy one thing most important. Donald lived most of his 33 years as an out gay man. Like Rory Buchanan, Craig Harris, Alan Williams, Don Reed, David Frechette, he died of AIDS. Like our elders, Audre Lorde, Pat Parker, and James Baldwin, he was a pioneering figure in the Black, lesbian, and gay literary movement. All of them died with dignity, fighting for rights of lesbian and gay people. They did not die in shame. This glaring omission ignited our fury and caused the late great activist and poet, a Sato saint, a brown-skinned man whose own recent AIDS diagnosis was a ticking time bomb, who stood more than 6'5" in stocking feet, a self-proclaimed diva with a French Haitian accent used for effect, to rise from his pew, saunter down the church's long aisle like a Parisian model walking on a runway, with determination, speed, and attitude. He stormed the pulpit, uninvited, slammed his hand on the Bible, as done when one wants to tell the truth. To everyone's shock, he screamed. Donald Woods was a proud Black gay man. He did not die of heart failure. He died of AIDS. If you agree with me, stand up. As in the way I met Donald, without questioning, I leapt to my feet and felt for the first time in a ceremony of pomp and circumstance free. In my peripheral vision, I saw a room full of strangers, divided by politics and identity. In the middle stood Donald's biological sister. For all of the stated reasons, I felt a strange affinity with her, like between us was an unspoken bond, like distant stars always having shared the same love from a different proximity. Is there something about that story that strikes some part of your experience? Do you understand why I wanted to read that story and why it hasn't left me since I read it the first time? I would love for you to write something in the chat. And I'm just going to be quiet for a minute. While you do that, I hope you will. Randa writes, the bravery of love always astounds. Thank you. Yes. Randa is my partner, and we lived through so many of those funerals. So many of the people that we loved had those funerals, and we knew so well those young men whose family didn't know that they had AIDS until they were in the ICU dying. And the bravery that it took to crash that funeral just astounded me. Powerful story, V saying. Right. Glad his friends spoke and stood up for his truth. Yes, I'm really glad they stood up. And I love that his sister stood up. Uh, thanks, Joss. Yes, Karen, thank you. Speaking truth, being brave, love no matter what. Yeah, that courage just knocked me in the face. Anji, interesting how some say the Bible is the truth. And in that moment with that hand and then voice, it was. Yes. Oh, yes. So great. So great. That's right. That's right. Yeah. I'm very fascinated by the different ways that the Bible is used, you know, how it's used so badly, and yet there's so much liberation in it. And you're so right. Thank you, Anji, for saying that. You're so right, because yeah, when he hit that Bible with his hand and 6'5", like a Parisian model walking down the runway. I just love everything about that image. And he slammed the Bible with his hand. Sandra says the power of truth and love. Yes. And it makes me think too about the times in my life when I have sat in a group like that, maybe sat in a spiritual community and felt screaming in my heart, there's something wrong with this. This is wrong. There's something so missing, or so not in alignment with what is really going on. And I love that he did that. You know, one time Lama Rod said that some of us are natural disruptors. And I was really relieved to hear that, because I know I'm kind of a natural disruptor. um, and what he said afterward, after he said that, was, you know, we have to kind of understand that when we disrupt people's peaceful world, like this, like Asato did that day in the church, there's blowback, you know, and we just have to expect it when when we feel we have to be a disruptor and bring what we understand to be the power of truth and love. Um, and then that's so delicate too, isn't it? Because that also requires so much practice to understand what is our ego and what is something within us that is not us. Surrendering, you know, our comfort to being a channel for that, even if it's not what everyone wants to hear. Laura says, yes, Karen, very familiar. Too many of us have this experience of being the witness to denying what is real. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad that you think it's wonderful to hear this story. I just had to share it because I've been thinking about it ever since I read it a few weeks ago. Um, Pamela says in this book it's the bravest thing that she ever saw, and this is a wonderful book um, that I really recommend. And so, where do we see ourselves in this story? Uh, that's my other question. Is there a place where you see yourself in this church? Are you him? Are you the family? Are you the people who stood? And who is it that brings that word to you, that allows you to have that experience that Pamela had of feeling free for the first time because there was someone. Oh, yeah, good. The title of the book is Funeral Diva, by Pamela Sneed. And she is a professor, Black lesbian poet, and visual artist. And I think this book is not so old, and I really recommend it because this is like the breadcrumbs that I'm talking about too. Is that my friend Jim Matulski, who I've known for many years, finds these books, and then I read the book, and then I find this poet, a Sato saint, who she talked about. Oh, good. Oh, thank you, Sandra. Thank you. So, a New York Times article about it. I really appreciate that. Yeah, Laura, I was the coward. I'm glad you said I was. I was the coward waiting for someone else to tell the truth so I could stand. Well, I have been that person many times. Many times. And then many times, no one did tell the truth. Uh, I think many of us have experienced this in our Sangams. I think, yeah, it's hard to know, isn't it? Noah, thank you. I'm reminded of Bell Hooks' quote: love is an act of will, both an intention and an action. Love is an act of will, both an intention and an action. Thank you, Noah, so much for that. Because I've been thinking so much about intention. Love is an act of will, both an intention and an action. I feel like we're all being pushed now to have more courage. And to sometimes it's the courage to face our own wounds, like James Baldwin talks about. It's different for all of us, and I think it's different every day for all of us. But I think we're all being pushed in this time. And, you know, I have often been the coward waiting for someone else to tell the truth. It's delicate, though. I remember being really uncomfortable in a spiritual community, a Buddhist community, and understanding that what I really just needed to do was leave because I couldn't speak my truth without disrupting a piece that I think other people really needed to have. So it's delicate. It really does require that constant inquiry. But when I heard this story, I realized it was going to stay with me forever. So love is an act of will. I want to say it again, both an intention and an action. I really appreciate that you put this in, Noah, because intention is what is another thing that I really wanted to talk about in the context of prayer, because I would love for us to get more comfortable with this whole idea of prayer, because it is an intention and because it is an exchange of energy and because it is a kind of magic, a kind of casting of a spell. His name was not a Sato saint, this poet. I looked up some information about him, and a sato is a Haitian drum used in voodoo, and he was very connected with his culture, his Haitian culture. And on election day this year, his friend wrote this on his Facebook page: I hope Isato will cast a spell. He wrote it right before Election Day, next Tuesday. I hope Isato will cast a spell on Election Day. I hope it will lift our spirits all at once. I hope I hear him telling us it will be okay. I hope it will be magical and beautiful and just. I hope he and Jan was his partner, will stand with us at the front of the line and will guide the conscience of our nation and make us choose our better angels. And I love that too, because being part of this community and studying with Lama Rod has made me think a lot more about ancestors than I ever did before. So, I've been reclaiming a sense of devotion that I had many years ago. I have pictures now and candles and statues, but I also have an ancestor altar. And something that Lama Rod said a few weeks ago that I've been thinking about ever since is, the ancestors are lining up now. They're behind us. And when I read this Facebook post, I hope he will stand with us at the front of the line on election day and will guide the conscience of the nation and make us choose our better angels. I just love that, I don't know about you, but as an American, I feel like we narrowly escaped something, because millions of us worked for that. Millions of us had that intention. Millions of us prayed for these ancestors to help. This is such a precarious point. We're right in the middle, not at the end of a shift. And we've been putting our energy into a certain kind of resistance, many of us, or we've been putting our energy into our healing, which also is healing the earth, healing the rest of us. Like all of the ways that we have intended healing, all of the ways that we've been working for healing, whether it's for our communities, for ourselves, for our friends and partners and family, or in our activism, it's all going to the same place, to the collective, finding our way out of the cold, dark house of injustice and cruelty into who we truly are. Um, and 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 our way of resisting is going to change now. I think how we think about it, how we do it, and I don't know what it's going to look like. I'm interested in that. Um, you know, there was a big activist group around the G7 conference years ago in Seattle. And what I learned since then was that there were affinity groups. There was a group that was doing this kind of tactical thing and another group doing that kind of tactical thing. And they were all trying to get into the building where the G7 was meeting. And each of them had different like specialities and tactics. And there was one group that were dressed as clowns and they had other kinds of silly outfits on and they had noisemakers and they acted really strange. And they were called the Tactical Frivolity Group. This is a true story. And they were the only ones that made it into the building because they acted so strange and were dressed so weird and they were so silly that the police were kind of afraid of them, but not afraid of them enough to confront them. So they made it into the building of all the other ones. And so, there's a South African proverb from the anti-apartheid movement, and it is, the mule kicks the hardest right before he dies. And I think we're experiencing that and will continue to experience that. The mule kicks the hardest right before he dies. And so now that there is some hope, there may be, at least we're not going to be living under fascism, but where there is still so much injustice and so much entrenched corruption and, um, you know, just unspeakably horrible things. Now is the time to be brave like a black gay male poet, to be brave in speaking the truth, walking like a Parisian model, making the Bible an instrument of truth by pounding on it. Or, as this same guy who wrote the Facebook page for for Election Day, he also wrote that if a Sato saint were alive now, he would be dressed in heels and appearing in drag at the White House. He he was kind of drawing that picture, and it was very beautiful. So I've talked for a long time, and I want to pause and see where you're at, and see what you're thinking. And allow us all to breathe. I'm just looking to see if you would like to say anything. What are your thoughts? And if you would like to just be quiet, that's fine too. Love to hear about using an intention. Randa, do you mean how? Is it like a question? How do we use an intention? Okay. Yeah, so I was thinking about that. I was thinking, how can I talk about that? And I actually have a question that I have a story that didn't make it. It's on the cutting room floor. So I will tell you that, and then I'm gonna read what Sandra says. So I remember having a powerful intention when I was 18 or 19 years old, and I decided I didn't want to live in a white world. I had grown up in a white world with just all white people. And I remember, and it was like a prayer, but it was really an intention. It was like, my life is not going to just be with white people. I had no idea what that was going to look like because I had always just been with white people. But at that point, my life completely changed. And it was because of my intention. Because I had that intention, doors opened. I met people who changed my life. So sometimes I think when there's a longing in our hearts, at that time I was just feeling something's wrong with this. I didn't know what it was. If we just excavate it, that wrong feeling, what's wrong? What's wrong? What do I need? What do I really need? What do I want? Um, that was the kind of process that finally led me to like, oh, I don't want to live in a white world. Um, and then an intention has to be renewed, but when it's powerful enough, I think it can keep opening doors. And if you keep walking through the doors that open, um, that intention keeps bearing fruit. That's how I think about it. And I'd really love to hear from other people about how intention works in your life. Um, like Noah, who brought up the beautiful Bell Hooks quote. Um, Sandra, the power of community, Sangha was so clear in all that you said today, as well as that of the teacher. Yeah, thank you. Hand in hand, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I really appreciate this community of Bhumisparsha very much. I love that it's multinational, multiracial, multi-generational, multi-gender, multi-everything. I love that. I think we're pretty wonderful. Without intention, all is chaos. Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, talk about being overwhelmed, right? Yeah, and I mean, I certainly thought about what my intention was in this talk, uh, and my intention really was to honor my teacher and honor people who came. I knew they were going to come expecting to hear him, um, and to get out of the way. Really, that was my intention. And every day I think about what's my intention for the day. V saying, when I pray to the universe or whoever I set an intention and ask for the highest good, yes, 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 yes. Also, instead of setting resolutions for the new year, I set intentions for the year. That's beautiful. That's so beautiful. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm gonna do that. I think I kind of already do that, but I'm not sure I have changed that language, and that's a really good way to do it. So, like, what would an intention be for the new year? What would an intention be for the day? Like I'm really curious about that. Sometimes I wake up and I'm like, what can I do to dismantle white supremacy today? Well, what can I do to help? Sometimes a prayer is put me wherever I can do the most good. But this asking for the highest good is really key. And I really thank you for bringing that up because when we're asking for our highest good, it's not always getting what we want and it's not always getting what is easy. And I know that's what you meant, and that's beautiful. Thank you for that. And how are you feeling about what can you say about how you're feeling about this time that we're living through right now? Really, this moment, this week, this day, because things are changing so fast. Yeah, He's saying, I feel heavy at times, but also hopeful. Me too. Me too. Exactly. Yeah, sometimes it's so overwhelming, but I do too. I feel hopeful too. And Reverend Angel has said last summer that she felt hopeful, and I was like, really, really, can you really feel hopeful? But I do too now. I feel hopeful. Um, Noah, oh, thank you, Noah. Moved. Setting intention allows me to take refuge in the outcome, whatever that may be, however difficult it may turn out. Yeah, yeah. I think something that really strikes me about these stories of like a Sato Saint and the other people like him, Pamela Sneed, is in their determination to be exactly who they are, who they were. Um, that was the most important thing that they could do. And so sometimes I think the most important thing I can do is just be who I am and keep following those breadcrumbs one at a time. Um, keep digging deeper and deeper. I want to read this poem. Uh, maybe maybe we'll just be quiet for about 10 minutes and go inside. And then if there's any prayer that you want to share or in the chat or any other thoughts, please do that. But if you just want to settle for about 10 minutes, I feel your goodness in your hearts and I'm grateful. I feel your intention and it gives me hope for the world. Bhumisparsha, touching the earth. Let's feel our grounding in the seed. Feel the love of the earth for us, the love that we have for the earth. All of us yearning for the earth to be healed, for ourselves, our families, our friends, to be healthy and safe. For us to continue to find the path to walk on. Our determination to serve. Our determination to become more and more who we truly are, light, love itself. And I don't know about you, but I feel like I can feel the sense of community. I can feel that we are entering into this space together. And I'm so grateful for you and for all the teachers and ancestors who are walking with us and showing us the way. Mm. I want to pray for Eddie's family to protect them from COVID. And I don't know if anyone else had a prayer. Yeah, I'm looking back at the chat and I agree, Laura. That's the thing. There is no going back to normal. Yeah. I think that the wisest people among us are telling us very loudly that normal is what brought us to the brink. And you're exactly right, Laura. You're exactly right. Yeah. And that's it. That's really important. It's something that I'm sort of pushing on every day. What does this mean now? We have to even work harder than we ever have in the last 4 years. And how are we going to do it? How are we going to be really smart? That's why I brought up the tactical frivolity group, because I think it's going to take some creativity. Tony, recently I've been thinking about refuge. And I've been feeling a deep connection with this talk about intention. I've learned that Vajra speech can be associated with shamelessness. And that feels to me like living with intent. Paired attachment to result. Paired with inspiration for living and knowledge that these are not two. Oh, I'd like to pray for a deeper trust in people, a more open heart for myself as well as any others who need it. Yes. Yeah, we pray. We pray for a deeper trust in people, a more open heart. For you, Tony, for all of us, as well as any others who need it. Yes. Yes. So there is this thing, I think, that we have to face this. In your words, Laura, I'm deeply, disgustingly embarrassed that my generation has accelerated the decline of the earth and society at an incredible pace. I know, me too, and yet I know I've been doing my best my whole life. You know? Sometimes I think, what if things are unfolding exactly as they should? What if it took this for us to really see, for enough of us to really see? I don't know, but I know what you mean. Yeah, normal is a really oppressive state. And so when people say they want to go back to normal, I think the answer is normal is what got us here. Yeah. And all of the great spiritual teachers have basically been teaching us how to resist oppression. Oh, thank you, V, saying, I'd like to pray that we treat all living beings with love, respect, and equity, regardless of race, gender, identity, sexual orientation, disability, illness. I'd like to pray that we all treat all living beings with love, respect, and equity, regardless of race, gender, identity, sexual orientation, disability, illness. Yes, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, these prayers are connected. Because if we did all have a deeper trust in ourselves and each other, an open heart, we could help that happen a bit. So, one thing is, I think it's important to remember that we're just a little piece of this. And so it's not all on us, And we need to let in the suffering of the world and let it go, because it's going to keep coming in, and then we keep letting it go, and our hearts get bigger from that. And there's a movement in that. And our intention for the world that we all want. I love that all of you are expressing so much love in so many different ways. And I love your prayers. These prayers are connected like stars across a big sky, or a big room of love connected to the same source of love. Well, we are love, that is who we are. And, Lama Rod is really teaching me to remember all the people that have brought me this far, that have loved me into life. And it does take so much courage every single day, doesn't it? Every single day it takes so much courage. And I can feel that you all have it. And I love that. Well, I'm going to close with this poem, and it's written by a Sato saint, this guy who had this courage. And it's from his poem called Nuclear Lovers, and he put it I'm grateful that Sandra, I'm grateful that we all get to create a new world and way of living, loving, and being together. Me too. It's like we really are giving birth, Like something Lama Rod's been saying every Monday is push, keep pushing. And I realize a lot of that is like, yeah, but sometimes you have to relax, because muscles don't work if they only stretch. So you have to relax and then push and relax and then push. And make sure you laugh a lot and push and breathe and push. But that's exactly right. I love that, Sandra, because we are creating a new world and we get to experience it in little ways along the way. And way of living, loving and being together. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Um, and bringing forward those cultures that always knew because they had to how to live and love and be together. Um, Bringing forth the people that have that kind of resistance. Um, Maybe the last shall be first, the first last. Okay, so this poem is uh, written by a Sato saint, and his lover had already died when he wrote this poem. In fact, he put this piece on his lover's gravestone, and he died 14 months later. He put on the gravestone, oh, thank you. I can't do this because I just love what you're writing. How to claim joy in this time of suffering. Yes, 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 yes. How to claim joy in this time of suffering, knowing that it's needed to sustain us. Yes, like laughter, laughter and creativity and ease, all of that. Because I think the more that we can do that, the more that we can really just lean into that, then the more we can push and the braver we can be. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, yeah. Do you want to hear the closing poem? it's uh it's by a Sato saint. He writes, as they sound the alarm, he wrote this to his lover. As they sound the alarm, let us run to the river where we first met, sat many a sunset. There, with bare hands, we will dig a deep hole in the earth, lay together. Centuries later, when they excavate, they shall hear two hearts regenerate love in the universe. Let us generate love everywhere we go. Let us love ourselves so fiercely, exactly as we are. Let us love each other so fiercely. And let us love this imperfect, crazy world. Let us love it into life, into justice, into freedom, into truth. Be safe and take care. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.